Okay, so hi Emily. Thanks a lot for agreeing to do an interview. I'd like to start with saying that you've received consistently positive feedback from your final year students for your teaching. Could you maybe describe how you managed to craft interesting and intellectually stimulating experience for your students?
Okay, so the module I'm actually going to focus on is a first year module called ENT 1000 PP. It's Entrepreneurial Thought and Action.
Okay.
It's a Plymouth Plus module that has over 300 students on it and services all the general business programs in Plymouth Business School. It is a difficult beast of a module because it is so big and it is conducted over 4 weeks, so it's a short period of time. However, I actually feel this is a positive thing and actually can produce some quite good experiences for the students because it is so immersive in nature. In answering your question, what we try to do is make sure that there is a continuous theme running through the module. So we have a project called Inspiring Futures, which is run in other modules as well for at Plymouth Business School, but for our general business programme students it's run in Entrepreneurial Thought and Action. Inspiring Futures is an opportunity for students to do a real consultancy project with real clients. Clients come to us, local businesses, organisations, charities come to us with a particular problem, an issue that they'd like resolved. It can be anything from they need a social media strategy to they need a little bit of market research done. They construct a brief and we allocate all 300 students in groups of 6 an individual brief, and immediately they have to contact the client, discuss the brief with them and work on that brief over the 4 weeks of the module, and by the end of the module their assessment is to present an answer and response to that brief in the form of a recorded presentation. So this is really the glue that holds this module together, and the entrepreneurial thought and action approach that we take is to provide lectures on the theory and the action, the skills needed to resolve the brief that each of the students have been given.
Okay, so that's great. So talking about those sessions that you do, how do you make those interesting rather than maybe just PowerPoints can become a bit tedious if students see those in every lecture? How do you make those sessions actually interactive and interesting for the students to come along and participate in?
It can be really difficult because they are a large group of 300 students, so in terms of space and resources you are quite limited. So what we've tried to do is to limit speaking in lectures, in terms of the lecturer speaking, to small blocks of about 10 minutes at each time, interspersed with activities or videos or some sort of interaction with the students, doing something a little bit different in order to kind of break it up, give them something different to do. So for example, we might show them a short YouTube clip of something that's relevant to the lecture of that day. We may get them involved in a small activity, be it a discussion, be it we've even had them doing illustrations. We've asked them to illustrate a point and then share it via a live Twitter feed that we have. And we find using things like the Twitter feed is a great opportunity for the students to give discussion and feedback in a large class, which otherwise they may not feel confident enough to do. When you're one student in a group of 300, you don't necessarily want to put your hand up and answer a question, but if you can tweet an answer to a question using a given hashtag, and it can just come up on screen with everybody else's responses, it feels a much safer environment than perhaps just putting your hand up.
Okay, so you're mixing it up, you're making some use of technology, and you're also asking them to film a presentation which they submit, so there's an additional learning experience or value added.
Yes, yeah, the technology, we try and encourage the use of that throughout, especially with the presentations. We don't just ask for a simple piece to camera, we try and get them to think about using different shots, and we do signpost them to the resources available on the FOBIT website and get them thinking about making the presentation more interesting, not only for the person marking their assessment, but ultimately these presentations will go back to the client, and they might find them a bit more approachable, a bit more easy to understand, and a bit more interesting if they're a little bit different.
Okay, so you mentioned there that there are resources that you point the students towards. Just moving on to the next question here on my list, how do you encourage students to do some independent learning and preparation before the sessions and before they meet with the clients?
What's really important is you having a really good Moodle site with a module this large. We broke the Moodle site down into week by week. And each week I'd use the checklist function on Moodle so that the students would go each week, see the checklist, and could actually tick off each thing they had to do that week. And I made it very clear on that checklist what needed to be done prior to the lecture and prior to their tutorial. Be that reading an electronic resource, which I would then provide on the DLE under that section, be it watching a particular video, be it completing a particular survey and bringing it to the tutorial with them. It was all made very clear using the checklist function.
And you find that improves engagement and the students come along having completed those
Yes,
tasks?
You're always going to get those that perhaps don't particularly engage with the DLE, and it's interesting because you can see that. You can click on the participant function and see who has and has not engaged and how long it's been since they've engaged. Interestingly, with the checklist, you can see that as well. You can see which students are ticking the checklist as they go. But we do find it makes it very clear and visible to them what they do have to complete and do by the time they come to the lecture, and we feel it has had an impact. Okay,
so the final part of this short interview, could you maybe come up with the three key things that you think keep students coming along and engaged with your particular module?
Okay, so the first one I would say is make everything as interactive as possible in your lecture. So don't just stand up at the front and use a PowerPoint. PowerPoints were great at one point, but now we've moved on. Perhaps think about using presentations and interspersing with interactive activities and using the space around you as best as you can. The second thing I would suggest is making the most of your Moodle site, making sure that everything is clearly labelled, and consider using the different functions such as checklists and importing YouTube videos and things like that. And the final thing I would say is look at having guest lectures and inspiring guest lectures to come in and support the theory and the action that you've been talking about with real-world experiences.
Emily Beaumont, thank you very much.
No, thank you.